It's pretty incredible to think about how a single gunshot in a single city could light a fuse that would blow up the entire world. That's exactly what happened in the summer of 1914. This is the story of the Great War, a conflict that didn't just change the map, it changed everything. So, let's get right into it. This quote, wow, it's from Sir Edward Grey, the British Foreign Secretary, and it just perfectly captures this sense of doom that was creeping over Europe. I mean, think about it. This was an era of incredible optimism, of progress, of science and civilization, and they were all about to watch it go up in smoke. It's truly chilling. So, that's the big question, right? How does one assassination lead to a global catastrophe? And the truth is, it doesn't, not on its own. The reality is that Europe in 1914 was like a giant powder keg. It was packed with tension, with old rivalries, and these incredibly complicated webs of alliances. The assassination wasn't the cause, it was just the spark. Let's see how that spark lit the whole thing on fire. Okay, so first up, a world on fire. We're going to look at the domino effect. To really get what happened, you have to understand the setup. Europe was basically split right down the middle. Two massive armed camps, just staring each other down. You had two major teams. On one side, the Triple Entente. That's France, Britain, and Russia. They're all looking at Germany's booming industry and military and getting, well, pretty nervous. On the other side, you've got the Triple Alliance. Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. And they're looking around and feeling totally boxed in, completely encircled. So what you have is this toxic cocktail of mutual fear and suspicion, a real recipe for disaster. And here is where it all goes wrong, so fast it'll make your head spin. Watch this chain reaction. Step 1, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, is assassinated. Step 2, Austria-Hungary uses this as an excuse to declare war on Serbia. Simple, right? But then, Step 3, Russia, seeing itself as Serbia's big brother, starts mobilizing its massive army. Germany sees that as a direct threat, so Step 4, Germany declares war on Russia. And then on Russia's ally, France. Step 5, to get to France quickly, Germany plows right through neutral Belgium, and that was the final domino. Step 6, Britain, who had promised to protect Belgium, declares war on Germany. And just like that, in a little over a month, all the major powers of Europe are at war. It's breathtaking, really. Now, Germany knew this two-front war was a possibility. They'd been worrying about it for ages. Their big, high-stakes gamble to solve it was called the Schlieffen Plan. The idea was simple but absolutely audacious. Knock France out of the war with a single, lightning-fast punch through Belgium. Take Paris in 6 weeks. Then, once France was defeated, they could swing their entire army around to face the huge but slow-to-mobilize Russian army. Everything, and I mean everything, for Germany depended on this plan going off without a hitch. Well, spoiler alert, the plan didn't work. Not even close. That dream everyone had of a short, glorious war, it died a pretty brutal death in the fall of 1914. And what replaced it was something new. Something absolutely horrific that nobody saw coming. So, what went wrong? Well, a few things. First, Germany totally underestimated Belgium. The Belgians fought back hard, and that slowed the German advance. Then, Russia got its act together way faster than anyone expected, forcing Germany to pull precious troops away from France to deal with the Eastern Front. The German army, now weaker than planned, was stopped dead in its tracks at the Battle of the Marne, just outside Paris. After that, it turned into this bizarre race to the sea, where both sides just kept trying to get around the other, until they ran out of land. They ended up creating a solid, unbroken line of armies from the English Channel all the way to Switzerland. And that line became the trenches. We're talking about a 350-mile-long scar across the face of Europe, a massive, muddy, fortified network of ditches. The new kings of the battlefield were the machine gun and the artillery shell. To attack meant going over the top, climbing out into a hellscape of barbed wire and shell craters called no man's land, running straight into a hail of bullets. It was pure, industrialized slaughter. Progress wasn't measured in miles, but in bloody, hard-won yards. This was the great stalemate. And while all this was happening in Europe, the conflict was just exploding everywhere else. This wasn't just a European war anymore. The Ottoman Empire jumped in with the Central Powers. Japan joined the Allies and started grabbing German colonies in Asia. Vicious fighting broke out in European colonies all across Africa. At sea, Britain flapped a naval blockade on Germany, and in response, Germany unleashed a terrifying new weapon, the U-boat submarine. It had truly become a world war. The human cost was, well, it was astronomical. Just look at that number. 1 million. That's how many soldiers were dead by Christmas of 1914. That's after only 5 months of fighting. All those promises of being home by Christmas had turned into an absolute nightmare. And the horrifying part? The war had barely even started. For the next few years, the bloody stalemate just grinds on. Millions more die for inches of mud. But then comes 1917. And in 1917, two massive, game-changing events happen that will pivot the entire course of the war. First up, Russia completely collapses. The country had been hammered with staggering losses and people starving back home. Revolution explodes. The Tsar is kicked out, the government falls apart, and the Russian army just dissolves. For Germany, this is a dream come true, a huge win. The dreaded two-front war was finally over. But just as one giant leaves the stage, another one enters. Germany gets a little too confident. They make a desperate gamble and restart unrestricted submarine warfare, meaning their U-boats will sink any ship heading to Britain, including American ones. On top of that, the British intercept the infamous Zimmermann telegram, a secret German message trying to convince Mexico to attack the United States. That was it. For America, that was the last straw. The U.S. declared war. So now you have this incredible high-stakes race against time. On one hand, Germany's advantage. Russia is out. They can now move 500,000 battle-hardened soldiers from the east to the west for one final knockout blow. But on the other hand, the Allies' advantage. America is in. That means a fresh, massive army and the full weight of American industry is on its way. The whole war now boils down to one question. Could Germany land that knockout punch before the Americans could show up in full force? And that brings us to the beginning of the end. The spring of 1918, Germany is about to make its final all-or-nothing gamble. This was it. The Great Spring Offensive of 1918. Germany threw everything it had left at the Allied lines. Using brand-new stormtrooper tactics, they completely shattered the defenses. It was a massive shock. For a terrifying moment, it actually looked like they were going to win. They pushed further and faster than they had since the very first weeks of the war in 1914. But the German army had pushed too far, too fast. They were exhausted, they were running out of supplies, and they had taken huge casualties. And then on August 8, 1918, the tide turned. Dramatically. The Allies, now reinforced by streams of fresh American soldiers, launched a colossal counterattack. It was so devastating that Germany's top general, Ludendorff, called it the Black Day of the German army. When your own commander says that, you know it's over. And what came next was a total rout. It's called the 100 Days Offensive, and it was just a relentless, non-stop Allied advance. First, they shattered the German lines at the Battle of Amiens. Then they broke through the supposedly unbreakable Hindenburg Line. Then Germany's allies just started collapsing, one after the other. Bulgaria, the Ottoman Empire, Austria, Hungary, they all surrendered. With total military defeat staring them in the face and revolution breaking out back home, the German Kaiser abdicated and fled the country. And then, violence. At 11 a.m. on the 11th day of the 11th month, 1918, an armistice was signed. After 4 long, brutal years, the guns on the Western Front finally fell silent. The fighting was over, but the world was fundamentally broken. Now came the hard part, trying to build a peace out of the wreckage. And as we're about to see, the scars of this war would run deep, and its so-called peace would create a whole new set of problems. Just take a second and look at these numbers. 2 million German soldiers dead, over 2 million Russian soldiers dead. France, Austria, Hungary, the British Empire, all with over 1 million dead. We're talking about more than 9 million soldiers killed in total, and that's not even counting civilians. It's a scale of loss that's almost impossible to wrap your head around. An entire generation of young men was just gone. The world that emerged from the war was totally different. The old world was gone. 4 massive empires, the German, Russian, Austro-Hungarian, and Ottoman, had simply vanished. The map of Europe was redrawn, with new countries popping up. But the peace treaty, the famous Treaty of Versailles, was incredibly harsh, especially on Germany. It forced Germany to accept all the blame for the war and pay crippling reparations. And that war guilt clause created a bitterness and resentment that would fester for years to come. Which leads us to this final, chilling thought. It was famously called the war to end all wars. That was the hope anyway. But by creating a peace built on punishment and blame, did the victors accidentally sow the seeds for something even worse? Was the end of the Great War just a 20-year truce before the start of an even greater, more terrible conflict? That's the question it left the world with.